I now call this meeting to order. First we'll have public comment. Is there anyone on Zoom?
I am not seeing anyone, Chair.
Okay. The next item on the, no. Now to our next agenda item. As mentioned during our last meeting, hope to do a roll call for HAC members from this moment forward to better track our attendance. Let us begin our roll call. Bruce Dickerson,
Here.
Dave Bachman. Absent. Deanna Fields. Okay. Casteron.
Dina Castrejon.
Yes.
Hi, we're here.
Gina Griggs. Absent. Haley Purdy.
Here.
John Epstein.
Yes.
Melinda Bell here. Narender.
Here.
Nathan Teskey.
Here.
Nina Stanford. Absent. Renee Browsey. Absent. Ryan Kane. Absent. Amy France.
Oh, sorry, we don't have to do that. It's just HAC members.
Okay, all right,
Later.
that's it.
Yes. Can I see that for a minute?
This,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Thank you all. Moving forward, do we have any members who have any updates that we would like to share with the group related to the work we do? Okay, moving on to the executive. If no updates, I'm not hearing or seeing anyone have any updates. So let's move on to the next agenda item. And that is the executive director's report. Now we have Molly Rogers to share this month's executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Bell. It's so nice to get everyone together, and we're sort of growing up as a committee, which is really nice, getting a little bit more formal, so I appreciate all that.
Yes.
So, and I think Ryan must be on spring break, I take it, which is good. Good to be able to take a spring break. I'm here with you all to share some appreciations and thank yous to Narender and Renee's time. We're coming to an end. We have very long terms here, 4 years. So we keep you busy, and we keep you committed to the work that we're doing to help shape housing policy for Washington County. So Narender first joined in April 2021. And Renee started all the way back in 2020. Some nice time. And then of course, Renee served as the chair for the last 2 years, which was really nice too. And Narender was always there. You helped make connections for us of potential real estate opportunities and ways for us to increase our pipeline. And anyway, thank you for asking the hard questions and keeping us on track. We wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Renee, thank you to Renee too. I'm also very excited to share that we're going to be bringing on 5 additional members next month.
Yeah.
And I just want to quickly just express a tremendous gratitude to Melinda and Ryan and BNF and other folks who reviewed the 9 applications. And I think the slate of 5 we're bringing in will really round out this group. I am thrilled to see the level of just commitment and knowledge and years and years of experience in this arena. So hopefully we'll continue with the work and the prowess that you guys have brought. But it will definitely change the dynamic a bit, I think. It will add more numbers, which is good. And I think hopefully will keep us moving in the direction of honing why are we doing the work we're doing and keeping us accountable. So I'm thrilled that they will join in April, at least onboarding there. In the meantime, I just want to share a couple sort of actual staffing updates for you all. Awareness. So we have Joe Trifolo from
Good.
Robert Half. Has been serving as our deputy CFO position, the lead finance position we have here at the department. You've been with us now, what?
4 months.
4 months. Okay, it feels
Week
long.
of November.
Okay, and Joe has really taken the helm of getting us through audits. We just got through the budget and providing some some stability and continuity ever since Michael Park's departure. I just wanted to share with you that we have recruitment right now, heading through interviews for that permanent position. And then once we have that position filled, we will be then hiring a secondary housing finance lead position called a controller position. So finally gonna be able to be more responsive to you all in our financial reporting and getting us through all of our work. We have Mersada here who got us through budget, but we have hack budget to work with you all in the next couple of months. So the team is gelling, the team is forming, we're learning a lot. It's all discovery, so I just appreciate you bearing with us through that moment. On the federal front, I just wanted to acknowledge we did the biggest humbling, challenging news we've received out of DC recently is the extremely shortened timeline we've gotten on the emergency housing voucher program. So for a little bit of background, that was a new voucher program that was stood up as part of a larger American Rescue Plan, ARPA package that helped folks who were focusing on those who were experiencing homelessness or domestic violence. For us, it is using our coordinated entry list, which is people who are experiencing homelessness. And we were able to move close to 90 households into housing through that new voucher program. Well, that voucher program was supposed to outlast, through the time period of ARPA, which was through the end of this decade. And I believe they gave us some additional time for that sort of attrition approach until 2035. Well, now we're getting notice that the HUD and the Trump administration will be closing down EHV in 2026. So there, 2026, end of 2026, just the end of next year. So we have very low attrition on that program, which makes sense. We're talking about people who have been experiencing housing instability, and it's not just they can absorb that level of rent. And we right now have about 80 households on that program. With the current attrition rate, we believe that means 60 to 70 households will still be on the program next year, if not more. We just don't know. So we're having some internal conversations and just want to let you know we're looking at thinking about different options and scenarios of what that means, but just to elevate this is actually a national crisis that to be next year, because Liz remind me again how many households were moved in overall national HB. 60,000. 60,000. And I was just in New York last week visiting with friends who work in housing, and they said that New York City has right now 7,700 households that would lose their assistance next year. So we're part of a bigger wave of crises, of people can't just absorb that kind of housing assistance. So just making you aware of that. That's the biggest sort of change we have heard about in the last month. On that. I will say we are incredibly blessed in Washington County to be part of the supportive housing services measure by Metro, which we were able to use that for rent assistance called ARLA, and targeting the very similar populations. Most communities in this country do not have a supportive housing services. But brighter news, we were able to open up yet another Metro Affordable Housing Bond project called Altura, which means height in English. Altura is a bridge project, and it's their third actually in Beaverton in the past year. And it's our Washington County's 9th out of our 12 total regional affordable housing bond communities that will have opened in the last 3 years. So it's incredible progress there. What's really cool about Altura is that it's in the South Cooper Mountain area. It's a rapidly developing and gentrifying area, but also developing and revitalizing kind of area. And there's a brand new high school right across the street from Altura, which is considered one of the top high schools in Beaverton. And so our residents we got to meet some residents who will be going to that high school. So that was really warming to me, because that is really what we do. We try to make sure we're putting housing where people can have all the benefits and opportunities that they can across the community. This was a $40.17 million building. It was designed by Alex Salazar and constructed by Colas, and of course, the usual typical low income housing tax credit partnership. It also was financed by the Energy Trust of Oregon, eBank, and we were able to dedicate about 12 million of our bond towards this effort. So we get to still see the fruits of all of our labor, and we have 3 more projects to come. We're going to spend a little bit time later today talking about a transitional housing project that we are getting ourselves more involved in than we had initially and contemplated, but just wanted to share with you. I think some of you may not have heard, we back in December, our board approved 2 transitional housing projects. One Transcending Hope, and the other one was called the Cornell Road Recovery, which is a Central City Concern led project, with a partnership with CODA, Northwest Instituto Latino, Instituto, that's a lot of syllables, were awarded to convert a hotel into a transitional housing program. And then the Transcending Hope one was awarded 8.1 million to purchase the land there that will then build a new back for about 39 years.
Yes.
Yay. And that will have a focus on behavioral health. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but really it's trying to get us higher level thinking about what's our role as a county and as a housing authority when we are partnering with groups to bring on different types of housing types. Because we want to play a role in each of them, but it may or may, but our role sometimes is just to be a funder, or sometimes our role is just to be a voucher provider, but sometimes it's about us getting more as a co-developer or general partner, and sometimes it makes sense for us to use our asset management capacity and BDO. But we want to do it with intentionality and with asking the right questions and having you help us ask the right questions when we go into those sort of partnerships. So with that, I will open myself and I'll be open to any questions or comments you may have.
The program you were describing, which is a national crisis, what was the acronym you stated?
EHV, the Emergency Housing Voucher,
Okay,
and it came out of ARPA.
or
Any more elaboration on that, Liz?
I think the interesting thing about that is that there hasn't been anybody newly added since 2023. So it is something we're already expecting the attrition, and that's why we are not at the 89 that we were awarded. And so it has been a year and a half, so a little bit more than a year and a half, that no new additions have been added. So when Molly mentioned the attrition rate being so low, that is a little bit lower than what we see in our other programs.
which might be a good fit, so. The other question I had was Altura, is it full now? Is that so?
I believe it may be.
I'm not sure if it's fully leased up.
Yes,
I'm not sure if it's fully leased up. They had a grand opening. And when it's fully leased up, it usually converts to perm. And I
Right.
don't believe I had all done all that.
I believe they did their opening a little bit later, so they were,
Oh,
they
they may have been
may
fully
have been, I would say we'll try to get folks in right now, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Um,
I think they were maybe stopped taking.
Yeah, there's a wait
applications.
list right now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's the way
Okay.
it's the right-
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
That topic, if I could just raise it, it's not related to your report, it's just a positive topic. I saw the news, I think yesterday, about this MOU between HUD and Department of Homeland Security. Are you tracking this? You're nodding yes. Maybe
Yes,
it's too early to talk about it now, but if possible, the next meeting, I'd love to hear what the county is seeing around that and the implications for like get housing.
so Nathan is referring to a memorandum of understanding between Homeland Security and HUD, the two secretaries, agreeing to combine efforts to thwart us providing any housing assistance to non-citizens,
Did you say to what?
non-citizens.
About residents,
Well, sorry, what was that?
I mean, not citizens, but what if they're like residents, like.
if they're residents.
It's
Yeah.
for folks who don't have legal status.
Okay.
Don't have legal status, they don't want housing assistance to go to them. So that, what we call in our housing choice voucher world, we call them blended households. So they are specifically targeting blended households. There's no actual action or enforcement coming out of this MOU. It's just expressing intentionality that there may be action forward. We are talking as a management team of talking about different options and scenarios of what that could mean. It probably would likely be, that would affect both our housing choice voucher and our public housing programs. So we will have to come back to you on what.
Okay,
that-
thanks, I just wanted to
Yeah.
flag you.
What that could mean to. We have a tracking of other kinds of possible scenarios, just so we're not feeling flat-footed. But of course, we're not gonna make any action until we actually see what actually plays out, because there's been a lot of rumor milling. And then sometimes a wait and see, so, yeah. That's been hard too, so we've also not knowing.
So that you just, and I think that's good, you talked about not being flat-footed, so. I'm just not gonna be responsive to this really right now, but it seems to me that, especially when you go to your budget cycle. There's the budget where you think you're gonna have, and then there might be some, I'm not necessarily asking presented to us, but I think behind the scenes internally, you might wanna know what is our fallback position on a couple of things that we think could be on the cutting block. So you're just anticipating things versus waiting till it's a crisis mode. You've maybe thought through them a little bit. I'm not saying get it approved with those in, but, and I'm not sure maybe you want to present it to the public, but internally you might want to think about those things. So that's good about flat-footedness. And then also I'm just thinking, and I'm sure we already do it, and with our other partners in affordable housing, it seems to me there's only so much money to go around, but like this, losing these emergency vouchers, I mean, it's in her whole scope of things, I'm sure. Like, do we send a notice or let like Suzanne Bonavici's office know this is affecting us? I mean, are we going out to our politicians and giving them ammunition when they're speaking about housing? They can actually give true data to people saying this is affecting my constituents at this level. And I assume we're doing that kind of outreach politically, but I think it's a heightened time to do that, and even at the state level, our local representatives for Washington County. And then also I'm thinking, I'm sure the Greater Affordable Housing Network's doing this. It's really important to keep people in the state legislature informed of what's going on, because they're making budgetary decisions of the greater budget. And perhaps housing becomes more heightened for them if they realize in true data numbers how much we're losing in housing, right? And I don't know if you have to, but what I'm trying to think is being proactive versus we have a crisis, now we're jumping in a car as fast as we can to tell people in Salem this just happened to us,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's just strategic thinking is all I'm saying, looking forward.
I think it's a great comment, because a lot of the work you are all trying to do here too is also tie up our work with the legislative session. and putting in, taking positions. And so that's been really helpful. That letters have gone out, but we do have a government relations team. As you recall, I think Erin Doyle came last time. So what we have done is M is our person who's collecting all the EO, all the executive orders, all the things we're learning out of HUD and DC. We're combining all that. We talk about that with our OGR and our, and it's going to our centralized CAO, our county administrative office. They have their own tracking across the whole county. And then we're having those conversations with our congressional delegation. But that's a great point around how are we making sure we're adding these kind of talking points into our the state legislative talking points. Actually, Jess is actually testifying this afternoon,
Okay.
so I'm not sure if there's a sign in quite yet, but with what you're testifying on, I think that's a great point.
Chair Bell, I'd like to say that we are a little bit behind, just like a
Okay.
couple minutes, so I just want to make sure that we have time for the rest of our.
Okay,
agendas.
thank you for sharing, Molly. If there's no additional questions, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is the PHA plan update. I will now pass it to moving to work program coordinator M. Nichols.
Hello.
Hey.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here with you all today. And what I'll be presenting on is the highlights of our public housing agency annual plan update. There is, are you able to, oh, thanks so much, Deanna. So our plan update this year consists of 3 primary documents: the 5-year plan, the annual plan, and the moving to work policy supplement. We'll go over all of those in as much detail as we can in 20 minutes in a few slides. The primary purpose of this agenda item is to review the planning documents before we submit them to HUD. And we would also like to request your recommendation that we submit those documents and that we ask the Housing Authority Board of Directors to approve them. We'll go over the PHA plan overview, emphasizing some highlights, the major changes in our approach this policy cycle, and we'll give a little bit more attention to our moving to work waiver requests. Our 2 new waiver requests this year. One is for goal-based family self-sufficiency initiatives, and the other is to extend the zero HAP safety net period. And we'll dive into the bit of jargon there when we get to that part of our agenda. We'll also have some time for questions. Just a review of what the 5-year plan is. It is a strategic document that the Housing Authority is responsible for submitting to HUD once every 5 years, on years ending with a 0 or a 5. This is due for a full update. It includes information about our mission, our goals, a progress report on the goals we've stated in the previous year, our overall approach to enforcing the Violence Against Women Act, what qualifies as a significant amendment that will require a full public process during the next 5 years if we make changes, resident advisory board comments, our local certification with our community development department that we've coordinated with them, and comments on fair housing. The annual plan is a more comprehensive chance to update our operational policies, provide financial documents, and gives us a chance to provide updates in these areas. Not all of these areas had changes this year, and so we are not providing updates to all of them. But the annual plan is a chance to update these, and that is, as you imagine, submitted each year before our Housing Authority fiscal year beginning in July. These documents are actually due 75 days before then, so our due date is April 17th this year. And we start working on our annual plan and PHA plan in November of each year so that we can be prepared for that April submission date. Like the 5-year plan, we incorporate resident advisory board comments, local certification, fair housing, but it does provide more detailed operational updates. The 3rd document on the next slide, thanks so much, is our moving to work policy supplement. This is an addendum to the annual plan. As you know, the Moving to Work program is a demonstration that gives our housing authority the flexibility to design locally specific strategies that address program cost, family self-sufficiency, and increased housing choices using our HUD dollars. The Moving to Work supplement describes what our waivers are, what those flexibilities are, and how they are meeting our agency goal. This year in our PHA plan, some of the major sort of general updates is that we've tried to reflect the regional long-term rental assistance program as a PHA activity. As you know, that does rest on Housing Authority administrative documents. It's shared staff with Housing Authority and shared software systems and administration. And our previous PHA plan did not reflect that as a success of the Housing Authority. We've also updated our documents to align with the strategic framework adopted in 2024. We've updated our approach to how we describe our VAWA goals in the PHA plan to describe our overall compliance approach when previously it was just excerpts from some of our administrative policy documents. And of course, we've reported on our progress since the last 5-year plan in 2020. In 2020, our goal categories were to increase the availability of decent, safe, and affordable housing, to improve quality of life and economic vitality at affordable housing sites owned by Hawk and our partners, promoting self-sufficiency and asset development for families and individuals, and ensuring equal housing opportunity for all. And some of what we'll say in the next few slides reflecting on that progress will be familiar to you, but it was very exciting for me to compile this into a report for HUD. So I apologize for any redundancies, but it's nice to dwell on some successes. In the last 5 years, our special purpose voucher capacity, that means vouchers for veterans, youth exiting foster care, and families exiting homelessness with federal funding, have increased by 60%. That's 246 more vouchers. Our project-based vouchering has increased by over 160%. It's a huge amount. 294 new units under contract. And of course, all of those are contributing to the financial stability of even more affordable housing units and sites in our communities. And our regional long-term rental assistance partnership has added 1,600 assisted households to our capacity. So if we look at our program capacity, you can see like huge growth. The green there represents our local funding and the blue our federal funding. So you can see a lot of that growth is driven by local partnerships. And a lot of those are reflected in this room. So thank you all. So far as the Housing Authority ownership, we've expanded our ownership portfolio by 40% through the acquisition and construction of 262 units. That reflects Woodspring and Heartwood Commons. We've also rehabilitated and preserved affordability at 529 units at 10 properties. That's through AHP 1 and 2. Oh, nice. And there's the Section 18 disposition of 60 public housing units in the works, which will add to the financial stability and our flexibility for developing even more units in the future. Another huge element of progress is the implementation of our moving to work status and waivers. Since we received our moving to work status in 2021, we have 32 approved waivers from HUD, focusing on rent simplification, triennial reviews for seniors and people with fixed incomes, and adding flexibility and nimbleness to our local project-based voucher program. That directly contributes to that project-based voucher growth we saw on the previous slide. And also full implementation of the tiered rent study, which is part of a national study to see how a changed rent calculation formula can contribute to family self-sufficiency and asset growth. In 2025, our PHA 5-year plan is reflecting goal categories that contain room for all of the things we reported on before, but better align with our strategic framework. Those goal categories are housing access and stability, supportive services, affordable housing supply, fair housing, and engagement. We'll spend a little bit more time on the MTW waiver requests because this is the really details of what we are changing substantively with this report. With this report to HUD. There are two, family self-sufficiency goal-based incentives and zero HAP safety net extension. We'll talk about family self-sufficiency first. The background on this is that our family self-sufficiency program features case management that supports participant self-sufficiency goals. They set goals with a caseworker that is in our division. And then families that participate on this program and increase their earnings can receive payments to an escrow account that enables them to build assets. These funds are awarded at program graduation. The case management is the most important component of the program, but that financial reward is a huge and motivating incentive and very meaningful to the households that participate. The next slide, please. Under our current program and the traditional FSS program as designed by HUD, only participants who increase their income receive any escrow funds at program graduation. What that means is that a household is focusing on goals that don't directly increase their income, they won't get any escrow. So that might mean credit recovery, that might mean pursuing education, that might mean other family stability goals that they identify with their caseworker. And none of those result in any escrow award. As a result, 52% of our family self-sufficiency participants, while benefiting from meeting with their caseworker and progressing towards their goals, have zero escrow accrued. Meanwhile, 6% of participants who have been successful in that income growth area specifically have accrued over $25,000 of escrow, which is remarkable. But we would like to make this program more acceptable, especially because we are focusing on offering this program to youth exiting foster care, who are rightly focused on things like educational goals and eligibility. Our waiver request, if approved, will allow us to add goal-based incentives to the program, which will offer awards for households to complete goals, regardless of whether those are directly connected to income growth. So somebody who enrolls in schooling, who meets consistently with their caseworker, who sets a household budget, who then keeps to their household budget, or who opens a bank account might all be able to get a goal-based incentive and escrow deposit. Earned income increases will continue to generate escrow. There will be no cancellation of that. However, in order to keep this cost neutral, we will put a cap of $25,000 on escrow earnings for new FSS contracts. There will be no impact on pre-existing contracts, those households who are already successful to that degree of having $25,000 or continuing to accrue escrow over $25,000. The details of this will have to go through another approval and review process and be submitted to HUD in our FSS action plan. The HUD approval will just allow us to begin planning for those and making those requests to the HUD FSS team. For zero HAP safety net period, the background on this is that households who increase their income significantly can see their tenant rent portion increase over time until it covers their entire rental amount, which means their housing assistance payment, called HAP, drops to zero. We call this zero HAP status, and it is a really positive step towards household self-sufficiency. It's a good thing, but it doesn't always feel like a good thing for our households. It can be very intimidating to enter that safety net period. Next slide, please. These households have a safety net period during which they can report income losses and start receiving assistance payments again. But after that safety net period, they're no longer eligible for assistance. If they want continued assistance, they will have to go back to the waiting list, basically start over after they're exited at the end of the zero HAP period. Currently, that safety net period is 6 months. That's the HUD standard in the CFR. If approved, we will have a 12-month safety net of program participation. Next slide, please. One of the reasons we're hoping to do this is, as you'd expect, 6 months is not enough for all households to become self-sufficient. Close to half of our zero HAP periods and with an income loss report, not a program graduation. This chart shows that income loss reports spike in the last month of the zero HAP period. You can see a little bump at 3 months. Based on my review of the data, my guess is that that reflects true seasonal employment. And then that spike at month 5, I think, is reflecting households seeing pressure to choose between the housing stability versus their relatively recent income stability, and being pressured to make a choice there. So we're hoping to extend that safety net so that households can build more time and more confidence in that income, more savings, and not have that pressure to choose between 2 important sources of stability, month 5. With both of these waiver requests, we're hoping to expand self-sufficiency incentive, and in the case of the zero HAP, to reduce a self-sufficiency disincentive, to create an extended safety net for households building their income and supporting household self-sufficiency. That's the end of the overview. I apologize for talking a little fast, but I wanted to leave a lot of room for questions. So if there are any, please.
Yeah, I have 2 quick ones. The FS, the family self-sufficiency, the escrow, does that include IDA?
No, that's separate.
Okay, did you pair with IDA?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do have pair with the IDA, but that households might have both.
I see. Okay. And then just quickly on that $25,000 cap you mentioned here. Just mindful of what we've experienced with inflation in the last few years, and I guess it's.
That's true.
Is there an opportunity to index it to inflation? Because I've seen a lot of programs where it's like there's a number.
Mhm.
And then, suddenly that number or what it meant in 2020 doesn't mean what it means in 2025.
Right.
Our waiver request describes it as something initially set at $25,000 and it will be included in our family self-sufficiency action plan and updated through there. But that's a good comment. Once we get to the stage of planning what goes into our proposed FSS action plan that includes goal-based incentives, that's something we can definitely keep in mind or we will bring back the action plan.
Thank you.
I have a question. The zero HAP safety net, can you elaborate on that more? Because I didn't really understand.
Oh, sure. So at present, if a household's income increases until they're paying their full rental amount, what happens is basically a clock starts where if they are still receiving zero HAP, responsible for their full rental amount after 6 months, there's been no income loss that changes that. There's been no family change that changes that, or rent change that changes that. They are exited from the program. We say, congratulations. We've been so glad to have you and good luck. The household meanwhile is sitting there thinking, oh, but now if my hours are reduced, I have to go back on the waiting list where I was already for 5 years, 10 years. Now if I get sick, what's gonna happen to me and my family, So a lot of households feel pressure to choose at that point between that income source, whatever it is that brought them to zero HAP, and their housing assistance eligibility.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know what I would pick. And we want to just extend that time frame so that
2
households can build more stability. And
Okay.
if we get great data on this, like there's at least one housing authority I know of, because I used to work there, that has a 24-month safety net period. So 12 months is one that is an agency-specific waiver that we've seen approved pretty consistently. So we're hopeful we'll get it. And if we see success, I'm open to seeing what else we can do.
Yes. If you do achieve that zero status, are you allowed to stay at the residence you're currently in? You don't have to be pushed out because now you're no longer qualified?
No.
There is sometimes people do decide that they want to move because of that, and if they will move with a voucher, but if they move at month 3 and the new unit they find, they're still paying all the assistance. We actually will not enter into a HAP contract with that landlord because that contract it's hard to say. We're into a contract, never pay you assistance, and then exit. So there could be times where people's are reduced, but we have those conversations with those households as they're going through that process. But they get to stay at the residence And we're no longer that third party with their landlord, after they graduate.
Yeah, the housing assistance contract is connected to the lease, but not tied to the lease. So they continue to have the protections of their lease after the housing assistance payment contract ends. Of course, though, like if something happens to the household in month 7 and they can't pay their rent, they'd be subject to lease enforcement action. And that's questions. All right, well, the action item I'm hoping from you is to, and PNF, please forgive me if I don't phrase this correctly. But I'm hoping for somebody to make a motion to approve the PHA plan submission documents and recommend them for Housing Authority Board of Director approval and HUD submission.
And I'll move to approve. It's a 5-year plan as submitted.
Second.
Thank you so much.
All members. A motion has been made and recommended the fiscal year 2025-2026 5-year plan, annual plan, and the moving to work supplemental for submission. Is there any discussion? No discussion. We had some discussion. Remember, discuss the merits of the motion, and when discussion ends, we will now vote on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion, any abstentions? The motion passes.
Yay. Thank you all for your time. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Ems. I will now pass it over to BNF for staff liaison updates.
Yes, that is my section. Okay. Let's see here. I just want to make a shout out for our annual volunteer appreciation event. This happens every year. We're really excited to appreciate all our volunteers, which you are as part of the advisory committee. We celebrate all of the various boards, committees, and councils within Washington County. It's going to be at the Wingspan Event Center. It is on April 25th from 5:30 to 7:30. Usually have great nibbles, and also they do raffle. So that's fun. People win some stuff and usually have entertainment. So I will send out information to y'all after this meeting so you can RSVP. So just wanted to make sure y'all were aware of that. We are also doing a public meeting rules overview with our county counsel, Jacqueline Saito. We do this, we've been doing this every year since last year. This is mostly for new members coming into our advisory bodies, but you are more than welcome to come if you are a current member. This is just kind of gives you a 101 around some of our public meeting laws, and making sure that you understand what your role is within public meeting and ethics. And so this is just an overview. If you want to join, there's going to be 2 options. You don't have to attend both. We just wanted to give people as many options as possible. So April 14th is going to be on Monday, 1 p.m. and then April 30th at 12 p.m. On a Wednesday. So I'll send over these calendar invites to y'all, just so you have it. And like I said, you're not required, but highly encouraged, and you only need to attend 1. Okay, and then like Molly was saying, we have 5 new members that are joining us next month, which is really exciting. I'm very stoked about all the representation that we're having on our advisory committee. Thanks to Melinda and Ryan again for being part of that process as the chairs and helping recruit and also interview. They are going to do an orientation on April 2nd. So we'll be doing a broad overview of the housing authority, logistics, what we do as the housing advisory committee. So they'll kind of get oriented before they meet us for the first time at our April meeting. So that's exciting. So I think those were all of my liaison updates. I know I wanted to insert a new section onto our updates to have our chair share out any information that maybe Chair Bell or Vice Chair Kane are doing in respect to some of the work that we're doing. So I know that there is some work. So pass it over to you.
Okay, I will now provide chair report out to discuss some of the work myself and Ryan have been supporting. We have completed the review of section 1 and 2 of our bylaws, which consists of name and purpose. No recommended changes were considered. Our upcoming co-chair meetings, we will review section 3, which consists of membership information. This section may take a bit longer to review due to the amount of content. We will report back to keep folks updated on the progress. As a reminder, you are always welcome to reach out to BNF if you want to be involved in certain sections of the bylaws review process. Lastly, as promised, we did submit testimony letters on behalf of Hack Direction, specifically focused on preservation and senior housing. You can reference your packets for those letters submitted. We also worked with staff to draft a letter of supporting for funding on housing initiatives the Hack has supported with preservation and development. OHCS is slated to present the governor's recommendation budget beginning March 20th and ending March 26th with a public hearing. Thank you for Hack members and staff for their support and guidance throughout this legislative session.
Which is a great segue to Ryan Fisher.
Oh,
Yeah.
ongoing business. And we now have Ryan Fisher to give us our legislative update. Ryan, feel free to introduce yourself and take it away.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to see all of you. My name is Ryan Fisher. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So I'm coming to you live from the state capitol. I work at Northwest Public Affairs, and we have been representing the statewide Association of Housing Authorities of Oregon. Well, I've been doing this work for 16 years, and I believe our firm has been representing the housing authorities for over 20 years now. This has been a very busy housing session. That has been the trend over the last several years. When I started doing this work, we had to really beg and plead to speak with legislators about housing. And then, unfortunately, because of the housing crisis, things shifted. And now it's something that anyone who's running for office, as they're knocking on doors and talking to folks about what are their biggest concerns, housing is one of the first things to come up. And so as a result, we didn't used to have committees dedicated to housing, and now we have both on the House and Senate side housing committees. So yes, this has been a very busy session. I thought that I would cover a few of the topics that are of most interest to the housing authorities of Oregon, the ones that we're tracking the closest in the time that I have. And then I'm happy to answer any questions. There's probably a lot of stuff out there that maybe you've heard about that I won't cover today, that I might be able to provide you with a little bit of insight on if you have questions. So one of the biggest issues facing housing authorities right now has to do with what we're calling project stabilization, which is under this bigger umbrella of preservation of existing affordable housing. Over the past few years, we've made incredible gains in our ability to develop new affordable housing. This began really with the Kitzhaber administration, who figured out a way for us to build new affordable housing with general obligation bonds. And this allowed a much greater amount of resource to be dedicated to the development of new affordable housing. Since that time, we've been able to go from investing tens of millions of dollars into developing new affordable housing to investing hundreds of millions of dollars in affordable housing. What has happened, though, is that since the pandemic, there have been a lot of pressures, and I may be preaching to the choir here, but a lot of pressures on affordable housing developments in terms of the insurance costs that have gone up 500% over the past 5 years for a lot of housing authorities, costs of utilities, costs of labor for tenant services or for property management. And all of these are expenses that are coming onto properties that are rent restricted. And without the ability to raise rent, you know, these properties, they have to anticipate what all of those costs are going to be over the next 30 years when they build a brand new building. And when those costs go up so significantly in such a short period of time, it puts the whole financial picture of these projects in a precarious position. So this is a problem that we are having to communicate to the legislature, because it's not only about preserving the existing affordable housing that we have, which is very important, but our ability to continue to develop new affordable housing is starting to be threatened by some of the financial positions that some of these projects are in. So it's really an important topic for the legislature to tackle. It's not unique to Oregon. It's happening all across the nation. But it's going to be incumbent upon the state government to really step up in order to maintain a lot of these affordable housing properties that we've worked so hard to create. So there is a package that this large coalition of organizations that works under the umbrella called the Housing Alliance has put forward. And I shared with BNF a document. I don't know if you all have it or not. Oh, you're putting it up there. Thank you very much. So this is the document. You see the Housing Authority's logo on there, that the Housing Alliance and other groups are sharing. Housing Oregon is the Association of Nonprofit Housing Providers. This has a lot of important pieces to it. So one portion of it is when housing expires, when the affordability clause related to housing, the part that requires that the rents be kept low, expires, sometimes tenants can be put at risk. Not all affordable housing is owned by mission-driven organizations like housing authorities. Some affordable housing, as you in Washington County know well, because you've had a notable project in the last few years that has come out of affordability. If a for-profit organization owns the property, you know, they are after the certain period of time that they've agreed that the property will remain affordable, they can then raise the rents to market rate rents. And the people who live in that property have to figure out a new place to live in most cases, or else, you know, figure out how they're going to pay a significantly higher rent. So there were several bills in this package that are designed to protect tenants or to help tenants with this transition. So there's Senate Bill 31, which creates an expiring affordability mitigation tenant fund. So this could be used to either help people cover rent while they find a new place, or maybe help them with moving expenses. This bill moved out of committee and on to Ways and Means this week. Senate Bill 32 makes improvements to the Oregon Housing and Community Services Preservation Dashboard, which is on their website. And it requires the agency to include information about the expiration dates of affordability restrictions, the number of housing units, and the type and source of rental assistance that's used. So that's just a transparency issue that will help tenants who live in these properties know when their affordability is going to end a little bit sooner. This one also moved out of committee. And then there was a hearing yesterday on a bill. I mentioned the insurance going up 500% over the past 5 years. The governor's office has put together a bill, Senate Bill 829, which will create, I'm going on from my own list here, so I'm bouncing around a little bit on this one pager. This insurance bill will help with the increase in premiums. It's a $5 million fund that will be available as grants to nonprofit and for-profit housing providers that are providing affordable housing or shelter or project turnkey or navigation centers. We at the housing authorities had the insurer who provides insurance to most of the housing authorities in Oregon present to our last quarterly meeting. And while last year insurance rates weren't as bad as they had been the previous couple of years, he warned us that because of the wildfires in Los Angeles, the premium increases next year are going to be significant. And in addition to that, the replacement costs for these insurance policies is going to go up. So you're going to have to increase the amount of insurance that you are carrying for each property. So this could be very timely source of relief that the governor's office has brought forward, Senate Bill 829. Senate Bill 973 is another tenant protection bill that extends from 20 to 30 months the minimum notice that landlords must give existing tenants regarding the expiring affordability restrictions. So again, when one of these properties is about to go to market rate, the tenants are going to get 10 months more notice than they are currently getting. There's another bill that's part of this package, Senate Bill 51, which will establish the Affordable Housing Preservation Program at the State Housing Agency. Preservation is something that the agency has been doing, but there's nothing about it in statute like there is for new development. And so the advocates really wanted to see this get codified in statute, the work and the prioritization around preservation. And so that's a part of Senate Bill 51. It also includes some funding for property management and for asset management support, which is something that we think will help with some of these project stabilization needs that we're seeing. Another bill that's been very important to us is House Bill 3236. And I don't know if this group is familiar with the Affordable Housing Tax Credit. It's a tax credit that has been used to lower, historically it's been used to lower rents beyond what they would already be. So you put together a project, you figure out financing so that you can get to your 60% of area median income, and then you can add the Affordable Housing Tax Credit on top of that and maybe get those rents from being affordable at 60% of AMI, get them all the way down to maybe 50 or 30% of AMI. The statute only allows the affordable housing tax credit to be used to lower rents currently. But we see this as an opportunity. It's not being fully utilized. And we see this as an opportunity to help maybe with some of these expenses that are putting so much pressure on these projects. So there's this House Bill 3236 would change some of the allowable uses. You would still be able to use the affordable housing tax credit as it has historically been used, or you could choose to use it to help with project stabilization, helping to pay for some of those costs like insurance, et cetera, that have been going up. And there's no other revenue source that you can tap to try to address them. So those are some of the big projects in the preservation realm. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions before I talk about a couple other bills that we've been focused on this session. All right, I'm not hearing any questions, so that means I must have explained it perfectly, which is great. I'm doing my job. There is another bill that will impact Washington County, which is Senate Bill 50. This is a unique bill. It's an acquisition set aside. So right now in the metro area, and oh, you can go ahead and take, BNF, you can take the document down now. Thank you for having that ready to go. So right now, there are market conditions in the metro area where properties have been built in the last year or 2 years at market rate, but the owners are looking to sell them. And housing authorities in Multnomah County, Washington County, Clackamas County have been getting calls from realtors saying, hey, would you be interested in buying a property at a significant discount from what it would cost to build new? And in some cases, it might make sense to go this route of acquisition rather than developing new. Not in every case, but in some cases it might. But right now, the the department, the state agency that has the funding that we would need to access to acquire these properties, it's set up for developing new, which is on a much slower timeline than acquisition is. So Home Forward brought forward this idea of setting aside a portion of the funds that would be already dedicated to the metro area and make them available for acquisition so that the agency would have them available on a slightly quicker timeline so that some of these opportunities could be taken advantage of. So House Bill 50, which has had a public hearing, will set aside a portion. So currently, the way that the state takes these LIFT funds is they set aside 40% for the metro area, 45% for Western Oregon, and the remaining 15% for Eastern Oregon. So of that 40% that's for the metro area, $60 million would be set aside for these acquisition projects. So we're excited about this. It would just be for the next 2 years, and then this set aside would sunset. And if the funding isn't used for acquisition, it will go back into the development pool. But we're excited to be able to take advantage of these unique market conditions with Senate Bill 50. There's one other big idea that I can't see if Jill is in the room or not, but I know she invested, oh, there you are, Jill, invested quite a bit of time helping think this through. In some other parts of the country, housing authorities have been utilized to develop mixed income housing. And the way that that's been done is a revolving loan pool has been created either by a housing authority or by a housing finance agency or a public body of some sort. And the housing authority uses these low interest loans, construction loans, as well as some of the unique attributes of housing authorities, like their property tax exemption and some other things, to be able to develop properties that have a portion of the units are market rate, but then a portion of them are affordable. And you use the revenue that you generate from the market rate to pay for and subsidize the units that are affordable. What we don't fully know yet is if this model will work in the metro region. Jill has put a lot of time into trying to answer that question. It would require some pretty big, pretty large projects. But if it could work, it could be really transformational for the way that housing authorities would be able to serve not only low-income folks, but also provide workforce housing. So this bill was brought forward by Senator Pham, who is the new chair of the Senate Housing Committee. Her team has put a tremendous amount of work into developing this concept. It was piloted in Montgomery County in Maryland. It's also happened in Tennessee and in, I believe, Seattle and Chicago, a number of other places. So this bill would create a revolving loan fund at the state, and it would also adjust some of the statutes that govern housing authorities in order to make it so that housing authorities can more easily provide workforce housing. So it's an interesting concept. I don't know if it's gonna, it will likely move out of committee to Ways and Means, but the revolving loan piece, I don't know if that's gonna get funded or not. It's gonna be a tough budget session. So that's one that we've got a close eye on, and we'll see how it turns out. But if the market conditions are right, it could be, like I said, a really innovative way of developing housing. So it's one that we've been tracking closely. Any questions about those two bills?
It's a little off topic, but a little different. Has anyone ever considered using tax credits at the utility level, at the utility company? To say, if you add affordable housing, if utilities have gone up 10%, what we'll do is they can only go up 3% or something, and the other 7% the utility company could write off as a tax credit to the state and charge them lower utility rates.
Oh, I've
I mean,
never
we
heard of
utility-
that.
Well, I don't know if it exists, but I'm just saying, I'm just saying. Utility companies have always looking for good common good and trying to tell a good story in the
Mhm.
community. And so if you can show, I mean, you cap how much utilities can go up, but if they've really gone up more in the market, you use Oregon tax credits to say, utility company, you can come back to the state and write off the amount of money you've lost against your taxes and charge a lower rate of utilities for that affordable housing project to keep their expenses down.
So it would be a mechanism for the state to subsidize utilities for affordable housing.
Right, and
Development.
you restrict how much the utilities can go up in an affordable housing project year to year and try to cap them at some reasonable growth rate opposed to some crazy rate because the market's going crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Especially water.
but I'm just saying, and
It's just
you go back to the utility company, and then they can also turn into a PR move. Look what we did for this community. We are, even though they're gonna get a write-off, I mean, to them, it's a zero-sum game. They can still PR it out in the community and require a little more paperwork, but maybe it's the apartment project says, you charged me this much of an increase, you charged me $100 increase, the cap is $30. I'm filling out my form, and the utility company takes that form and can go back to the state and get a $70 tax credit on their taxes. So to them, they've really got paid the full 100,
Mhm.
get back into these affordable housing projects. And maybe the paperwork, it has to be done by the affordable housing project, and they just send it into the state, into the utility company.
John, do all utilities have tax liability?
I don't know, they have tax
Like
liabilities
Forest
or-
Grove has their own water, I don't think they.
Yeah,
pay tax.
maybe some don't, but I don't know if utilities do or not, but I'm just saying, but I wonder if there's some way you can do something that, like that would be advantageous to the utilities. I don't know if utilities pay tax or not. I'm just trying to think.
Well, like, I just was thinking water, Molly was saying water, like Forest Grove, where we have some properties,
Right.
in Star. It's city of Forest Grove.
Right. Oh, yeah, so that's city of
And they have
Forest
their
Grove.
own power.
You might be right, but I think maybe water's that way, but I'm thinking more about,
But they have their own power, their own electricity.
so it might not work in certain cities, but when you
Yeah,
have, but when you have like in Portland, you have the utility company, I assume they pay taxes, PGE.
I would assume so, yeah.
I'm just saying there's a different way to slice it and still it's just advancing the Oregon tax credits in them using it that way too.
Ryan, maybe, it might be helpful, Ryan, for you to explain that there's a couple competing ways of altering the OHTCs that you may want to get input from this group.
Yeah, so there are two other proposals for alternate uses of the affordable housing tax credit. One relates to home ownership, and I'm not as familiar with sort of the details of that, but I know that it would allow the tax credit to be used to make home ownership more affordable for lower income homeowners, first time homebuyers. And then the second one is one that the agency has put forward that would allow the affordable housing tax credit to go toward paying for resident services. I think that if we're asked as housing authorities which one we would prefer, if we have to choose just one of those, we would say the first one that I spoke about, which is allowing the funds to be kind of generally used for this project stabilization. But I think what's likely to happen is that all of them will get approved, and then the housing provider can choose how they want to use their affordable housing tax credit if they decide to apply that to their project. But yeah, but those are specifically related to the affordable housing tax credit, and that's a tax credit that banks get in return for offering loans at a lower interest. But I have some colleagues that work with PGE and Pacificor, and I'm gonna float this idea by them and see what their reaction is. It's an interesting one.
Okay.
Okay.
And a final note, the Oregon affordable tax credits isn't that big of a number, so are they gonna put too many things into it where it turns into, maybe it's fine if it's competitive, but as you said, right now, the only people really using it, I think, is Network for Oregon Affordable Housing, but with the banks, but so.
Yeah, NOAA has been in the middle of these discussions. We had heard from the governor's office at the beginning of this session that the cap on the affordable housing tax credit is about 50 million. I'm sorry, about 30 million, and that it's only about halfway subscribed. And Now, I haven't seen that on paper anywhere. That's just what was reported to me in a meeting with the governor's office. So but the governor's office is usually pretty good about vetting information before sharing it. So I've been taking it at face value. And I've been told by Bill Van Vliet at NOAA that you can leverage a significant amount of debt with that tax credit. So I'm not sure the full impact of it, but I see a hand up.
Hey, Ryan, Bruce Dickinson, excuse my casual demeanor. I had a house project that didn't end at 9 a.m., so apologies for this. But real quick question. I know a number of representatives and senators, and there's so many bills on the House and the Senate side that always get floated, and the reality is only so many that actually have impact. Of the bills you talked about, if you had to vote for kind of 1, 2, and 3, is there a priority of Bill 1? I mean, is the House Bill 3236? Is that the lead? Do you have any perspective for us on the 3 to 5, maybe most important?
Sure. So the first and second most important things, I think, actually don't have a bill number yet. They're going to be budget requests.
Okay.
And it's the bonding for new development, so the LIFT program, and the bonding for preservation and project stabilization. Those two items are going to be critical. And I think more than ever, the preservation piece is critical at this moment in time because of all of the conditions that I described at the beginning. So those would be my top two. Then I do think from the Housing Authority perspective, just statewide at least, that House Bill 3236, that Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit bill, would be third. And then I think this acquisition piece is pretty important. And I think Senate Bill 51 is pretty important, that has the tenant services and the property management assistance.
Okay.
Molly may have, and Jill may have some thoughts on this as well, but from a statewide perspective, those are the ones that I would say are top of my list.
Yeah, and I ask a little because of John Epstein's comment early, is there's a presumed budget this year and then maybe a plan B or C. And as you allocate those funds, how do you allocate them most efficiently was kind of the basis of the question. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Ryan, we had a question come up earlier in our discussion about how aware is the legislature of the various federal executive orders happening and the potential of real program cuts and any offsetting as part of that budget deliberation?
I would say it's something that the legislature is following very closely, particularly the co-chairs who are in charge of writing the budget. Now, that said, there is so much happening at the federal level every day. It's impossible to keep up with all of it. But certainly, if it weren't for everything that were happening at the federal level, this would be a pretty good session, I think, for housing and for some other areas as well, where there would be an opportunity for investment. Our revenue forecasts are up. Our reserves are in full stock. There would be some opportunity to do some cool things this session. However, because of the cuts at the federal level and because federal funding is 30% of our state budget, the co-chairs are extremely cautious about making any new investments and are really doing all they can just to try to keep things at current service level. They released their framework last week, and that was their main goal, is to try to keep everything at current service level. They're saying no new programs, and they have about $900 million for new investments, and the governor's budget suggests over $1 billion in new investments. And then, of course, there's 90 legislators in the building who all have great ideas for new investments as well. So it's a very competitive environment, but the federal cuts are really driving the conversation. One thing that we're hearing is that the argument, well, we need to backfill what the federal government does. That's not a very compelling argument to legislators right now because they're hearing it from everyone. But it's the reality, right? I just heard about another HUD decision yesterday that's going to impact some of the moving to work. Maybe it only impacts Home Forward because of when they became a moving to work entity, but proration of certain tenants based on immigration status, they're changing their ruling, and it's going to negatively impact a number of families in Multnomah County. And this is one that just came through yesterday. And it's, I also work with the Oregon Food Bank, and they just got notified this week that they're going to lose about $16 million in food deliveries. So they just, every day there's new news coming of federal cuts, and the co-chairs are wanting to set aside as much money as possible to try to offset them. But if there's big cuts to Medicaid or transportation, they just don't have the budget for it.
I just wanted to flag for you a couple, one or 2 weeks ago, we did hear about the emergency housing voucher reduction. They're shortening the length from 2035 to 2026. And that will be really most of the housing authorities in Oregon who will have people who came out of homelessness into housing through that voucher program. So as they're passing a biennium budget, we may want to think about that one, but let's, and then I would love to see what Home Forward learned yesterday about the blended families. We just heard about the MOU, but we hadn't heard any specific legislation about that. We'd love to see it.
Okay.
See that. Yeah. Thank you. Wow. Any other questions from Ryan, our lobbyist?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We're at time, so we're gonna have to move on to the next item.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
I will now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. I will now pass it to Jill Chang and Jess Larson, who will provide an overview on housing topics and updates on upcoming transitional housing projects.
Thank you so much. We have the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I'm gonna lead off. For record, I'm Jill Chen, Assistant Director of the Housing Authority of Washington County. And I think Molly set the stage earlier when she was talking about the integration of the housing and homeless side and how we look at our provision of housing itself and to the range of the community and that population we need to serve. So we first want to have this discussion with you and really go through some slides very quickly to set the stage. And with me is Jess Larson, the other Assistant Director of the Homeless Services. Next slide, please. Briefly, our work, 6 buckets. You'll see about ensuring housing solutions for our different populations, stabilizing our low-income residents through rental assistance and tenant protection, funding new affordable housing developments. And then we had talked earlier also about preserving affordability and affordable housing. And then increasing the ability for home ownership opportunities. We have talked about that in different places. And then the last is mainly this discussion today, which is a system alignment across our jurisdictions, across this jurisdiction, but also within our own agency for housing and homeless services. Next slide, please. Quickly, what does the Housing Authority of Washington County do? We have 2 main buckets. One is rental assistance, which is headed up by Liz Morris, and that is the management of federal, state, regional programs. We have a total of 14. You've heard a little bit about our different programs today. And that's, the main one was Section 8 through the federal government, but then there's a whole bunch of other ones, including the regional local rent assistance that you also heard about. That's from the Metro SHS funds. There's also the second big bucket, which is a real estate development, investments, and ownership. That is all of the properties in which we are the general partners or we own, and also all the Metro bond funds that we have invested, like the Altura. There's also a separate group that you've heard before about the HUD public housing portfolio. So there's a number of different aspects of that real estate, and that's headed up by Lisa Barn, who is not here, she's out of town for spring break. Next slide, please. I'll hand it over to Jess to talk about homeless services.
Thanks, Jill. Happy to be here with you all. Again, we're gonna be very brief in some of these framing slides to get to the crux of the discussion here in a couple slides, but you may have heard me say this before. I say this often. One of the things I love about working here in Washington County at our Department of Housing Services is what we get to do because we have our homeless work inside of the same agency doing our housing work. And we need both of those systems strategically aligning resources in order to serve the very people that are part of our mission that we are driven to serve. And so this conversation hopefully is going to get at some of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges when we build buildings serving these specific communities. So my side of the lane, if you will, our work in the Homeless Services Division is doing these things while we're building out rent assistance programs and developing affordable housing projects in the Housing Authority. The Homeless Services Division is running outreach teams and creating access centers, operating hundreds of beds of shelters in a variety of types every day of the year. We manage the system with a tool called Coordinated Entry that organizes the data of who needs housing and what kind of housing and how to prioritize them for which kinds of availability, and then that strategic case conferencing to coordinate those services. We train our providers. We have 25 organizations who contract with us to provide these services. They learn how to do that housing navigation, how to overcome those barriers to housing, how to do motivational interviewing to get folks ready to get back inside, and then pay that financial assistance to get them into one of Liz's vouchers or whatever the case might be. And then, of course, those ongoing services of case management so that once people secure housing, they have those wraparound supports to keep that housing and get better, thrive, stabilize, get the behavioral health or recovery supports they might need. And that list at the bottom is just the kinds of different housing programs we utilize. The next slide just tells that story of the rapid transformation and growth. You've been hearing it for the last 3-4 years now, but this is the scaling up of our system that has been made possible because of the region's investments in supportive housing services. So you see, before SHS, we had about 12 outreach workers and housing case managers. Now we have over, well, it's actually over 138 because we've got more that we've added in 2025 still. But nonetheless, that rapid growth, and this relates to that green chart or the bar chart that Em was showing us about the growth in the local vouchers created by Arla on top of our existing HUD vouchers. We're now at 5,000 as a housing authority because of these local investments. Next slide. Oh, and so passing it back to Jill. We're gonna go fast.
We have to have a half hour.
But we want to get to the discussion.
Right.
Yeah, we really want to hear your opinion. That's why we're going really. So there's a bunch of, I'm just gonna go quickly through the different housing types. And you also heard Ryan talk about different things. As the housing authority, we are currently focused on the bottom two, which is regulated affordable housing. This is housing developed with public subsidy requiring, you can call it income certification, qualified income residents. These are usually 60% area median income or below, and they usually have regulatory agreements anywhere from 60 years, no, 30 years, 60 years, and in different places I've seen 99 years. So that's regulated affordable housing. We also, and that is about, for us, about 900 units. Then in housing authority, we have public housing, and that's our 244 units. This is where the program was established by HUD. It has very specific requirements. It is direct federal payments to the housing authority for both operating and capital costs. And HUD regulates that. That's our 244 units. of which we are going to be disposing. We're in the process of disposing 60 units. You heard Ryan talk earlier about other items such as workforce housing, which is the second one up. And that's typically 81 to 120 AMI, but it's not publicly funded usually. Sometimes there is. There's also mixed income housing where there is some public subsidies and some non. There's naturally occurring affordable housing, which we're not going to talk about, and market rate, which we're also not going to talk about. So these are the different types of housing. Next slide, please. So when we talk about supportive housing, what does it really mean? There's a three-legged stool where you've got to have the building, which is usually a regulated affordable housing. Then there's a rental assistance, which we talked about, which is Liz's piece that talks, because most of these folks coming in are very, very low income, sometimes zero income. So they cannot pay the rent. And therefore we need to ensure there's a way to keep making sure rent gets paid, utilities get paid, all that gets paid. And then there's a supportive wraparound services, which is needed. This is on-site delivery of specialized services. It may include some behavioral health. It may include some addiction recovery. It may include some youth, depending on the needs of the population. It's wraparound services. Next slide, please. So we talk about different housing types for supportive housing. There is permanent supportive housing. You'll see they're project-based and tenant-based. And they're both similar in that they're housing, but there is that rental support and the wraparound service support. What we have brought to you before is usually the project-based, meaning the vouchers are in the project. There is a particular service delivery in the project. The tenant base is more where the tenant takes the local rent assistance and rent from a market house and have supportive service coming in. And then there's recovery housing where there is a requirement for the resident to essentially require them to be recovering mainly from substance use and they are required to call it dry or abstinence. And it could be permanent or it could be time limited. And then there is transitional housing, which is time limited up to 2 years with supportive services. And this is also programmatic specialization, I guess. And so next slide. So we just went through all these types of housing and all this. So what next is I'm going to transfer it over to Jess again, because we're in the process of doing a couple of these.
So we're doing new things here in the Housing Authority, right? Because we have these new resources to respond to the community need differently than we've been able to in the past. And that means we're learning to do new work as a housing authority in partnership with the homeless services funding. And so one of the big gaps we found in our system of care addressing homelessness was around recovery based and behavioral health based transitional housing, an option between shelters and permanent supportive housing. Now, people's recovery, people's housing journey is not always linear. We don't go from outside to shelter to transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, but we need those kinds of different options in our system to catch people wherever they may be at and help them get to where they're wanting to go next. So sometimes someone might come out of the state hospital into a behavioral health recovery program as transitional, and then stabilize and be able to get employment and move into independent housing. There are lots of different paths to stability. And what we have found in our homeless services system is that without an option around transitional housing or transitional housing programming, we weren't being able to meet everyone where they were at. People were getting stuck in shelter or not succeeding in shelter and getting kicked out because there weren't those level of supports that they needed. Or they would get placed in permanent supportive housing, get that lease, get their keys, decide they didn't want to participate, shut the door, and decompensate and not do well and end up with an eviction and more barriers to get back into housing. So the addition of transitional housing into our system is very intentionally designed to address this gap, utilizing one-time resources we had from supportive housing services and leveraging some of the expertise that housing brings. So here's what's next. And actually, it's a little bit still past tense because we've already made these steps. But in September, we released that capital funding NOFA opportunity. I'm sure many of you were here when we shared that information out. And then in December, after a very rigorous review process with many stakeholders at the table and different steps of that review, staff recommended and our board approved 2 new transitional housing projects. One is the Cornell Road project that was brought to us by Central City Concern. That is a new hotel or an old hotel going to be made new into recovery housing for people who are coming out of addiction treatment programs and wanting to get stable a little bit more before they set off into their independent life, whichever housing direction that might be. And then the second is Transcending Hope. Cheers to Dina and the team and their behavioral health, their vision for behavioral health focused program that will create stabilization for people who, again, aren't yet ready for their own independent permanent housing, but need those additional supports to get to that independent step, whatever may come next. So that's an acquisition of land that will be the development of a new 39-unit transitional housing project. Next slide, please. So we have some updates about both of these projects. Before I do that, let's talk about what is going to be in transitional housing. There are some kind of critical, essential components of transitional housing that is different, and it's important for this body to be aware how it's different from permanent supportive housing. So it's time limited, as Jill said. HUD says up to 2 years, but the point is it's limited to the time limits is based on those recovery supports needed. So what is the clinical case plan for that household who's getting into that transitional housing program, whether it's for behavioral health needs or recovery needs? What do they need to stabilize in that recovery journey and get ready for housing? And it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be in some cases up to 2 years. On site in all of our transitional housing programs will include both clinical supports for that recovery work and also that housing navigation, the case management we already have in all of our shelters to get folks into stable permanent housing ultimately. And those wraparound supports through case managers, which probably are going to include peer mentors, maybe on-site resident managers to support some of the safety needs of the community. We'll make sure there are 24/7 staffing because we're generally serving a higher acute, or we anticipate to serve a higher acute population, which is part of the key considerations we're bringing for your discussion today. And then the other cool thing about transitional housing, because it is necessarily based on those medical needs, whether it's behavioral health or mental health or recovery, we're going to be able to leverage Medicaid funding for those clinical services in addition to SHS funding, which will pay for those housing services and the operations. Those are some of the components to transitional housing. And the next 2 slides are just some quick updates on those 2 projects I mentioned. One in which the Housing Authority, Central City Concern brought to the staff after their award from our board. They brought to us a request for a change order to their approved project because they are experiencing some capacity challenges as an organization and could not move forward as the owner of the project. So they asked the Housing Authority to step in to help acquire the project and own it on our books. They are still supporting the development and programmatic development of that project. And our Housing Authority Board of Directors approved that change order request. And then actually we completed that sale just a couple weeks ago in March.
We haven't broadcast this announcement. We're having some strategic conversations with the neighbors before we celebrate this exciting new project coming our way. But it is publicly available information. And all of that project development and program development is underway as we speak. The program is anticipated to open in the summer of 2026, which I think is about the same timelines. Next slide, please. Of Dina's project. Are you also on a summer of 2020? It says April 2020.
It says April 2026, but I think we're a little bit behind.
That's okay. That's what happens with capital projects, as this table knows very well. But there's a quick overview. The first step in this project is acquisition of the site. And then there will be the redevelopment of that site with a new building. I think that's just a very simple SketchUp design of what that new building might look like. And then in this conversation for you all today, where we're really focusing on the housing authority's role owning these projects where we are providing services to higher acute households, we really want to talk about PSH too. We are exploring this new responsibility in our project currently at the Heartwood. You're all very familiar about that, but that's kind of the first time our housing authority has stepped in as the owner of a 100% PSH building. And we are all learning how that's a bigger and different kind of responsibility. And we're all learning how critically needed this kind of housing is. And so the Housing Authority is moving forward with another PSH project. We're working on some funding from OHCS through their PSHI Institute and pairing that with some funding from the Affordable Housing Bond that was designated specifically for PSH, and trying to acquire, almost close to acquiring, Jill, a piece of land in Forest Grove. The acquisition is underway. There's too many details I can see in her head, so I won't ask. But we envision a 60-unit PSH building for folks that were serving a Latinx community with a specific focus on behavioral health. So very exciting projects underway where we're combining our expertise and role as an owner of housing with our expertise and resources in providing critical services to acute populations. And the next slides, Jill will walk you through. This means we have to think about some of these challenges. Oh, this is just the timeline project, and that PSH project is a little longer, further out. So it plans to come online right now at the end of 2027. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that as it progresses. But all three of these projects sort of hold some of the same critical questions for us as a housing authority. So with that, in the next slide, I'll pass it back to Jill.
Thanks, Jess. So there's some questions and concerns we have as housing authority, as owner of these properties. And we wanted to make sure that we put out to all of you, yes, our considerations for be it permanent supportive housing or transitional housing. Because this is not, let me just say, just affordable housing or low income population. This is really a high needs population requiring a range of services. It's not just resident services, it's wraparound services. And how does that mix in the building work best for the people we're trying to serve, as well as for us as owner operator? And then going down, next one is really intentionally designing that service partnership and the requirement for clear roles and responsibility, meaning who's that resident service provider, who's that supportive service provider, who's that property manager, and who's the owner, i.e. us. And then what we're also finding, for example, at Heartwood, is the need for 24/7 security. It is not transitional housing, but it is supportive housing, and it's a very, very high needs. And as we all know, or maybe we don't, many of those concerns or issues rise at nighttime. It always seems to happen between 10 and maybe 6 a.m. So it's always that evening, late evening shift kind of issues, which there may not be a service provider on staff. Need for strong property management. They need to be mission aligned, but more importantly, they need to have specialized training and trauma informed training. They need to understand this is not just a low, quote unquote, just a low income person, right? They need to work with their case manager. They need to enforce the policies. Higher risk operationally, and all of this filters down to higher risk, operational risk. Larger reserves, more wear and tear on the building. Need for like floor drains, we found this in the Heartwood where we had a fire. Small fire, 1 unit, 7 units taken down.
Oh,
Right, 7 units. It's like just water damage all the way down, right? So you need to understand the importance of almost purposely built buildings. And then if you don't have purpose-built buildings, how do you mitigate? And then costly insurance. You heard Ryan say insurance is just skyrocketing. For us, we are actually rated as one of the highest risk in that affordable housing insurance pool because our portfolio has such difficult populations. And therefore, it does also mean, how do we have operational feasibility and sustainability? One of the key things we know is you cannot have debt. Once you have must-pay debt, it forces you to manage a building in a certain way, and it's just very hard. And then also, we just talked about specialized construction, trauma-informed design. That is actually in some ways more expensive, floor drains. You know, I've heard somebody say, well, you don't even want balconies, you don't even want openable windows because of the population, but you still need to have, you know, airflow. So how do you make all that work? So, some next questions, and this is where we really need you all to help us.
And this isn't the only time we'll be talking about this.
Right.
Yes,
This is
we
the
have
beginning
ongoing.
of multiple conversations because we only have 5 minutes really.
Oh,
until our
no.
Financial report.
We have financial reports, okay.
So that's
Sorry.
why, yeah.
We really wanted to bring this for you all to think about, give us some feedback. As we take on this expanded role in permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, what are your concerns, guidance for you to ensure long-term stability and success, not only for the housing authority, but also for the people we're trying to serve? And, you know, I, as the assistant director with P&L responsibilities, I can tell you, Heartwood is not easy. We're running hundreds of thousands in the loss, right? 24/7, all the staffing is huge operation. And then, oh, I'm sorry, Haley.
No, please keep going. I just wanted to raise my hand so I just have a moment to make a comment in response.
And then what are key information policy considerations that we should bring back to you for consideration? How would you define our success? And how would you want us to help think about and frame that? Financial sustainability, partnerships, you know, where would you give us some guidance on that? On that note, yes, Haley.
Thank you. Lower my hand. Here at Scott Edwards Architecture, we have been really investigating a lot of this and talking with a few different clients specifically about PSH housing as well as residential treatment facilities. I think it's imperative that the housing authority spend time with behavioral health providers and understanding how they're tackling a lot of this. This isn't, I would repeat what you've been saying, Jill, which is this is not affordable housing. This is a very different type of population and very different type of need and considerations. And so I would like, I know time is short and so we don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but it's definitely something I have specific interest in and would like to play a supportive role here in helping you guys here, because it's something that's at the top of conversation where I work. So.
Thank you, Haley.
Well, as a housing provider and not at the capacity of a 60-unit facility, But, Transcending Hope has 30 locations now. And we have many different programs. And, I don't know how many are aware of our programs, but, you know, part of that is Aid and Assist Community Restoration. We have 8 locations. And, we have stuck with the housing model because of the high needs of the population. And we have live-in house managers specific to that with 24-hour, like we have an after-hours emergency line. We have different policies in place. We've had a house burned down. We've experienced, you know, I've been with Transcending Hope since 2018. I'm also a woman in long-term recovery of 21 years, and I have a son with a diagnosis of schizophrenia and substance use. So I've been in many SRTFs, I've been in many hospitals, I've been in many treatment centers. And I have partnerships with Cascadia and Fora Health and other entities. And I would highly suggest that the consultations, bringing in Andy from CCC and Monta and getting them on board to help consult with this project. I believe it's going to be highly successful as long as you have on-site live-in supports sporadically throughout the building and also have the case managers attached, and the collaborations are very strong. Communication is everything, like, and making sure everyone's on the same page while you're walking through this. This is great. It's something that has been needed for so long. I also sit on the Oregon State Hospital Advisory Board. So they're consumed with aid and assist population that need to be in the community. They don't need to be at the hospital. We can serve them here and transition them into permanent housing from our programs. That is what we always target to do in our aid and assist locations. Once someone's found able or never able, we try to access ARLA vouchers or other permanent settings, and but they take their supports with them. So the supports that they have created while residing in the location go with them into their new location. That's imperative. So peer services and whatnot.
Peer services.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that if I could. I work for New Narrative and we work with the Aid and Assist, and we do have a couple of participants who live in her homes. We were contracted through Washington County through the Community Navigator Forensic Peer Program. And I can see how that program is needed. I wish there were more funding and more of us out here to do the work. I'm a community navigator now. And recently I went out to McKenzie Ridge and took a participant out when we were having our weekly meeting. Leah Jones asked, like, how did you get him out? And I said, I just asked. Yeah, so that there's things that are coming together that we're learning along the way, that the people that we're serving, to get them out in the community more, you know? And I think that was a great thing. The guy that we took out, he had so much fun. He thanked us. You know, it's like it's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's good things that are happening with Transcending Hope in this pilot program that's going on.
So Jill, I was interested, I mean, there's the humanitarian side and the social side, and then there's the economics, right?
Yeah.
And I think you gotta balance the two, and you know, because on one standpoint, you can't feed a program. I mean, maybe you make a decision you want to feed it, and it runs a deficit, and but it's knowing up front that's what you're planning on doing, versus all I'm saying is there's a balance, right? And there's the social humanitarian side, which is really important.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, you can't get into so much stuff that's really taking away from other programs you have. Money you're making elsewhere is just feeding this one program constantly. So unfortunately, it's a balance, and I think that's what you're asking. So I mean, I'm more focused on the economic side. So all I'm saying is I've been looking at kind of like what the downside is and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
and it's now owning property, so you got that going on, and, you know, I don't know if, I don't want to sound negative, but, you know, I don't know if by putting a program like this in place, you have to put restrictions on that it must remain transitional housing, or can you have more loose things that really it's just a 60% project, but your goal is to do transitional housing, so in 10 years, if you lose all your funding, you can transition this building to something else if you needed to, because you haven't put restrictions on it that you can't ever transition this building. So I mean, just thinking through the economics like that, giving yourself options.
Yeah.
I mean, so from the economic side, I'm happy to participate there, you know. And that's why we have this committee, because there's people that are more focused humanitarian.
Yes, we have to have
You
everyone.
know, right. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm anti that. I'm just saying, my brain kind of works more on the economic side of it.
And I think part of this for us, and I appreciate both, all the perspective, because this is exactly what we're hoping to hear. And I don't know if and I want to hear, you know, what are some of the best practices for running this type of building? But in answer to John's question, we have looked at options, because we also know we're funding it with SHS money. Unless the SHS measure is extended, we can't run a building with no funding.
Right.
So we're looking at options. What happens if SHS happens or doesn't happen, or is significantly reduced? There's, you know, buying the building may just be the easy part, but it's actually operating the building.
And I just want to offer up this, we will come back to this next month because we will have 5 new members as well. And I think it would be really crucial to have that balancing kind of conversation, and we want to hear more from you, but we're not trying to replace capacity in the system. We just we want you guys to advise us on what's the appropriate role for us to support you all who have the knowledge base. We don't want to duplicate, we want to supplement.
Right.
So that's where we would, I would love more feedback sort of next month. Would you just have 6 minutes left to do our financial report? And that's
Okay, can we get to Haley really quick, or?
I just had one statement. I'll make it quick, is we've spent a lot of time talking recently with clients, especially related to permanent supportive housing on insurance and the incredible insurance challenges out there. So just waving the insurance flag, which is, I see Jill nodding your head. So you probably already know, but there's just, and we being mindful of how we as architects actually are responding to those demands from an insurance standpoint. So that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Maybe we have you come back, Haley, and be part of a broader presentation of what you guys are finding. That would be great.
Yeah, I never thought I would be included in conversations on insurance, but here we are. So yes, I'd be happy to talk more about some of the things at an upcoming meeting. So thank you.
So 5 minutes left. Joe is going to do some financial slides.
Okay, thank you.
We're gonna put some numbers to what we have been talking about here. However, I learned a lot in this meeting in that these numbers are reflective of the past and the way we've been reporting them in the past. We're not showing supportive housing services in these numbers. We are only showing the housing authority numbers. So what we learned today is we need to start bringing these numbers into this meeting also, because they are so important to what we're doing here. In fact, those numbers are even bigger now. That chart we saw, we were down here, now we're way up here, but we're not reflecting, we've got to start reflecting that. So in the future meetings, you'll see that. So I'm going to show you a couple of numbers just to give you some indication of what we're doing. Housing choice vouchers, we're just going to show you a budget to actual comparison. We are showing you a budget for a full year. We're only showing you 6 months ending December 31st. So we are hoping to see that our actuals to budget are about 50%. We're going to show you that we got 48% of the housing vouchers been spent. Public housing is at 51%. We're showing you that the housing choice vouchers are 25 million. The biggest numbers on the board there. The expenses are down below. We're showing that the housing choice vouchers that are going out at just about 47%. So we're very close to 50% of our budget. And I see you looking at me because I'm not talking so fast.
You're okay, you're fine.
So we will go fast, but we are just basically going to show you that we're talking millions of dollars, 60 million for the year, 30 million spent so far to date. money comes in, the money goes out to these programs. Hopefully they're basically one for one at that point. We'll go to the next slide. And people like to see charts with colors, so I'll say the blue color is going to be your budget. The red color is going to be how much we've actually spent. The green color is saying this is what we're forecasting to finish our year at. So the red is almost 50% of the 60 million. And we're also showing the housing choice vouchers are a very significant majority of what we're doing here, but we also have public housing, housing development, and affordable housing numbers there. We'll go to the next slide. This is the expenditures. Again, blue is what the budget was. The red is where we're at. The green is what we're forecasting. Again, we're at just about 50% of our spend through the year through December 31st. We'll go on to our next slide. And we're going to look at it just a little bit differently now. We're going to show you that a little bit more detail in a different format, same exact numbers, only spread out a little differently. The federal grants are the 25 million. The tenant revenues are at 22.7 million. We have other revenues. Most of that has to do with one property that we make quite a bit of money on. It's Guatanama. And that one brings in some good cash. And so almost 50 to 60% of other revenues is from that property. The investment income just happens to be the cash on hand that's generating interest income and investment income. Capital funds, we're showing there is a question mark there as to why are our actuals only at 90,000 compared to 1.1 million. That has to do with the way we draw down our funds. Moving to work has allowed us to draw down funds earlier into the operating account and then later put them into capital projects. So at this point of the year, through the first 6 months, you'll see more of the funding because of moving to work has been put into the operating side of it and not into the capital side of it. Materials and service and controls. That is a big number. That is representative of a lot of repairs that are being made on properties. So you have people, maintenance people going out. We've got a lot of, for some reason, a lot of roofs have been repaired lately. So there's been a lot of roofing repairs, a lot of just going into the properties and doing your general maintenance, dishwasher repairs and kitchen remodels because we've been having some problems with kitchens. We have the other expenses that we're going to show here. You got your utilities and insurance. We've been talking about that as being some big dollar amounts. And so you can see some numbers there. We'll go on to the next slide. And again, we're going to show you some colors here, just in the same type of category, showing the federal funds are the largest component. You have tenant revenues that are, helping out, but it shows you how much the grants are supportive of the services that are being provided. We'll go on to the next slide. And it is going to show you, again, the materials, the housing. Oh, so here's the key here. We do have the materials and service contracts. We have our own payroll, administrative and overhead costs, but the housing assistance payments are what is going out the door. The biggest dollar amounts are in the housing assistance payments. You'll see down here, if you look at the true numbers, it's 22.6 million in the housing assistance payments. We budgeted for the year 48,204. So we are trending just a little bit lower on the amount that we are pushing out, giving out to the community. We'll go on to the last slide. And I thought this one is my favorite because I think it puts it gives you an idea of what we're doing for the community here. Programs, the first one is the total programs that we have out there for vouchers. It is tenant protection, so they don't get evicted. It's for veterans. It's for foster youth who are transitioning from the foster care system and trying to establish themselves in the community. That's 22, that is actuals of 20 million. We have people moving into the county and we're spending 1.6 million on people moving into the county and then having to support them from other jurisdictions. So another one here, the mainstream voucher is 1.4 million. This one assists non-elderly persons with disabilities. So we're spending 1.4 million there. But again, it gives you an idea that what good services we're providing is if you have non-elderly person with a disability, we are supporting them. The next up is emergency housing. And emergency housing is just about 800,000. And this is to support people with a risk of being homeless. They're fleeing domestic violence and they're just recently homeless. The next one is on the single family homes. We are drawing down on annual award grants in that line item there. I will say that I found it interesting at that HA, I had to kind of look that one up because I am new to it. It has to do with farm. It's a farm type of a grant that we have a rural area out here, so that was $22,000 spent there. I apologize, it was so quick, but I think what is missing from this discussion as far as the financials is the supporting housing services side of it and the Department of Housing Services, which is also providing content here. And Jill.
Let me just also add, this is the Housing Authority financial statements. What you do not see at all is any of our limited partnerships. So the bulk of our affordable housing projects, the inflows, outflows of that 600 unit or so is not on any of these financials, because that is a separate legal entity. It is not part of the Housing Authority books. So when you're looking at this going, why is affordable housing so low? It's because of that, right? Those projects are huge. I think it was over like almost 100 million in construction costs, not on here because it's separate accounting books. I mean, John, I'm looking at John going, John knows that. He's done a ton of these, but that's why it's not on here.
So just in summation in my own head, looking at all your variances and your percentages, basically, this is 6 months worth of operations. It's half a year. Nothing was really out of line. I saw a few at like 52% usage, but it's not like something was at like 90% usage. I mean, and there's other things in the 40s. So basically, I know there's timing differences, but basically nothing was materially out of line for 6 months when I was trying to run my eye through those lines quickly.
That is correct, and also acknowledging that the big spend and big revenues have to do with vouchers.
Right.
So you're going to generate the revenue through the voucher, and then you're gonna spend through the vouchers by then paying off the landlord.
Okay, they can be various, but I mean, these are big numbers, but basically there was nothing that looked like a huge variance way out of line, up or down. As we go into those numbers, right?
So far, yes.
So it's in balance pretty much. There'll be some timing issues. And then the other question is based on what Jill just said is, we don't have any of these LIHTC projects, I think based on our legal relationship, we probably don't even have to, but that we're having to feed those.
And it's bringing up a question that we are dealing with at the accounting level, is that we've had a number of 10 apartment unit projects transfer over from being run or owned here to being in part of the tax credit partnerships. And so we're having to reallocate how we distribute our salaries and wages, because those are gone. And now we're absorbing those into other areas.
So that's okay to me. I'm saying, we don't have anything, when I say feed, I mean, we don't have any, when there are any big deficits that we have to, we're having to take general funds and support them.
That's right. We do not, in the numbers here, we are not needing to take any of what we call local fund.
Right.
Our corpus.
Okay.
The Housing Authority's corpus.
Okay.
We do have Housing Authority corpus that we are using to fund, for example, our PSH Institute project, because that's all the pre-development
Right,
costs.
got that.
We're also using our corpus to fund all like the Metro Bond project, the Aloha 209 project, which you have seen before.
It's from the operation.
But not for.
Operate, I'm just not saying there's a drain, there's not a drain.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Yeah, we're only using it to fund capital
Okay.
costs right now,
Okay.
not the operating.
all right.
Thanks
Thank
for.
you. I know it's
Thank you. I will now ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. I now call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, that was a lot of information and
Wow.
Yeah.
time.
That was good.